Good morning. You know what I think is stupid? And if you guys don't know, I'm about to tell you. Except you probably read the title. So, I think the political system these days, the political system's got its problems, but not the political system. It's our view of politics is stupid. Our view of politics is stupid, and I don't get it. Now, the main thing that I think is really dumb is how we handle disagreements and political differences in our beliefs. And that is to say we don't handle them. The default setting of coming across somebody who has a different political belief than we do is just to ignore them. We distance ourselves from them, we stop talking to them, and then I think too often, this seems to be the rule, not the exception, which I think is a tragedy, that we treat our political opponents as subhuman. And if I had to guess, if I can share one man's opinion out of the rest of the world, I think it's because we probably get too wrapped up in making political beliefs our identity. And why is that? Probably because we often vote aligned with our personal beliefs, and it feels like when our political beliefs get attacked, then we are getting attacked, and then we have to defend ourselves, and we can't just live with the tension of somebody disagrees with what I think, that's gross. And so we have to make some kind of mental separation, maybe even a physical separation, to get ourselves away from them. And we have such a hard time just coming to terms with, oh, you think that, and I think this, and it's totally different, completely the opposite even. Well, okay, that's fine. It's like, and I suppose that kind of makes sense, is that we don't want to live in community with people who don't share similar personal values to us, going back to the personal values aligned with political values, and then we kind of conflate the two. And we don't like living in community with people who don't share our personal values because it makes life a little bit more tense and a little bit more difficult. But the thing is, we are perfectly capable of living in community with people who don't vote like us until we discover they don't vote like us. Then suddenly everything changes and we don't like them, we don't want to be near them, we can't agree with them on anything. And I think that's just stupid. Overall, the main thing is that we treat people like their political views. We treat people like their political views as their political views. We say, oh, I don't like your political views, therefore I don't like you. And it's my wife and I were just talking about this not too long ago. I just don't get it. I don't get it. The political differences, I don't care if people have different political opinions than me. That's fine. I am perfectly comfortable saying you agree with this person, I agree with this other person. If you take a step back, I think the first hurdle that most people run into is recognizing that other people have good reasons for their beliefs, just like you do. It's like, most of the time, we see somebody and we think, I can't believe you would think that. I don't know why you would think that. but I have a perfectly logical reason as to why I think this. And we just can't wrap our mind around this idea, like, I have a perfectly logical reason for what I think, and you also probably have a perfectly logical reason for what you think. I just don't know what that logical reason is yet, because I haven't taken the time to ask. For example, I was recently at a counseling conference back in May, I guess. So not too recent, but so I was at a counseling conference back in May, and one of the sessions, the breakout sessions that I attended, was about ethics and diversity within ethics, and how we as counselors need to be able to cater to a wide variety of clients, a diverse clientele, and we have to have multicultural awareness so that we can be of the most use, the most service to, the greatest service to our communities. And so we talked about abortion a little bit, and we, the presenter was like, consider these two people. One is more traditional, more conservative, the other is more progressive, and this conservative person might say, like, why might they be against abortion? And like the presenter had us yell out some reasons, like, well, because this person sees the baby as a human life, the fetus is a human life, and thinks it's murder, and so upholding the dignity of the baby and protecting the woman from any potential medical complications during the pregnancy, and because it aligns with their religious beliefs, and because it's right, because it's good, because it protects the rights of the baby. A lot of that was founded on this belief that the fetus is a human life. And now we think about the more progressive person. Okay, why might they be pro-abortion? Well, because we're protecting the rights of the woman, and because we're trying to protect the woman from any potential complications during the pregnancy, and because it's good, and because it's right, and because that's what the woman deserves. And ultimately, the two lists turned out to be the exact same. It's like integrity, dignity, like protecting life, like all that kind of stuff. And I don't think when we're having that conversation in real life, in daily life, I don't think we consider that. I don't think we consider, I have my beliefs for a good reason. At least it's a good reason to me, and that's enough to believe something. It makes sense to me, it's a good thing, good reason to me. And we don't consider that the other person probably has a different, but probably equally valid, good reason for believing what they believe. But we think they must be stupid, they must be ignorant, they must be a bigot or an ism or whatever, or they're like a terrorist or a murderer or whatever, psychopath, whatever you want to say. Because we can't stop and ask, hey, so like, we disagree, tell me a little bit more about your stance. Tell me a little bit more about your stance. And so part of it is probably the human psychology piece of we don't like living in cognitive dissonance, of recognizing I have my beliefs and you have your beliefs, and I can see both sides of it, and it kind of makes sense. That holding those two competing beliefs in our head at one time kind of creates some cognitive dissonance that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, and so we don't like doing it. We distance ourselves from that. But you can do both. Like you can have a conversation long enough to say, okay, I see where you're coming from. I disagree, but I see where you're coming from. Thank you for the conversation. And you hold those competing ideas in your mind long enough to say I get it, makes sense. And then you resolve it by saying, well, I disagree, and I still, like, maybe my mind has been changed, maybe my mind has not been changed. I still believe what I believe, or maybe, oh, okay, now I believe what I believe for different reasons, in a new light, new information, whatever it is. That's good, that's growth. But ultimately, we just have such a hard time saying, oh, you think this and I think that, and okay, whatever. I think it goes back to the identity thing. That we treat our political views like our personal identity, and we have such a hard time separating those two. And I think in my mind, you might disagree, and that's fine. In my mind, we live by our personal beliefs, but our personal beliefs get conflated with our political beliefs during the election cycle, the election season, I should say. So you got like leading up to midterms, leading up to the general elections or the primary elections, and that's when it becomes really front and center. And of course, all of the political ads and the campaign ads don't help. But overall, we live by our personal beliefs much more than by our political beliefs. And so we should probably focus on that more than just political beliefs. And gosh darn it, would it kill us to be a little curious? Would it kill us to be a little curious about why other people think what they think, why they believe what they believe? I made a Instagram reel about this not too long ago, about the like courageous curiosity and just asking, when you encounter an idea that you don't like, could you take some time and just think about, why don't I like this? Why don't I agree with this? And I recommended in that Instagram reel, I recommended journaling as an idea laboratory, thinking about it in a safe space where you don't have to feel pressured to change your mind, because it's just you and the notebook, you and the Word document or whatever, you in your own mind, you and yourself, thinking about this idea, like abortion, for example, or the big ones in the news. What is it? Immigration is the big one, of course, or tariffs, or the economy, whatever you want to think about. Next time you read a headline that pisses you off, or you hear a news story that pisses you off, just think, what was the story that pissed me off? What was the competing viewpoint that pissed me off? Journal about that. It's like, here's what they thought, here's what the other person thinks, the other side thinks. What do I think? I think they're stupid because, I think they're foolish because, it doesn't make sense because, and then just write that out. One, that's a way of solidifying your belief, because I think we should be more proactive about, I believe this because this, instead of I don't believe that because this, or I believe this because I don't like that. I think this thing because I believe in this fundamental truth of the universe or the world or whatever, rather than I think this because I just disagree with what the other person has said. And so wrestling with a competing idea in the safety of your journal is probably one of the best ways to do it. Or if you have a very compassionate friend who thinks differently than you do, but who's willing to explore that with you and give options, having a civil conversation. I had this, my roommate was on the other side of the political spectrum than I was, and we had some really great conversations simply because we were able to sit down and say, like, tell me more, why do you think that? Why do you think this? And then we had a conversation, and we were mature enough to say, like, okay, that makes sense. I disagree, but I get where you're coming from, and that's cool. We don't have to agree on everything. And this was a person I lived with in the same apartment. Like, we have a hard enough time doing this with neighbors who live in a different house than us. I did this with somebody in the same, 1,000 square feet. It is possible. I know it is. Anyway, I think a big problem with the politics in our society and how it's approached right now is that we get so wrapped up in, this is what I believe, and anybody who believes differently than me is like a demon, or is a bigot, or is a racist, a homophobe, a transphobe, a furry, or whatever. We get so caught up in calling the other side names and just dehumanizing them. For what? Just to protect our ego, just to protect our pride, just because we hate sitting in the tension and the uncomfortability of considering an alternative viewpoint. I think it's so dumb. Honestly, let's just grow up a little bit. Let's grow up a lot of it. Let's mature. let's just approach more of these political conversations with curiosity, because I think you'll find that people think the way they do for reasons other than what you assume. And so curiosity is a way to open the conversation instead of shutting it down. It's a way to build bridges instead of burn them down. If there was like one thing, I guess I haven't given this much thought. This is the first time I'm thinking this thought. If there was one thing that I could just like, our whole world has more of this, it'd probably, I don't know what would be at the top. Maybe curiosity. I'd have to give that more thought. But like curiosity would be up there. Curiosity would be up there. I think this is where human psychology gets in the way of pro-social human behavior, is that we look for patterns, which is good, to keep us alive, which is good. We try to detect threats, except then we identify people with competing political viewpoints as a threat, and so we avoid them, or we shun them, or we like demonize them, whatever, instead of trying to understand who they are, why they think what they think, and recognizing that, hey, we're actually much more similar than we think. I think it's just silly. It's just silly. Be curious, be kind, be courageously curious. If you're courageous enough to say, I have this belief, this is my belief, and this is why, but also humble enough to say, I might not know it all, I might be wrong about something, then you can enter into a conversation like that with somebody who thinks differently than you, and you can say, all right, at the end of the conversation, worst case scenario, I can always fall back on my beliefs. I can reject everything they've said, and I am the exact same as when I entered this conversation. Or probably even more likely is that you change nothing about your beliefs, about why you think what you think, but you have an additional perspective on why somebody might think differently. And that is reinforcing for your beliefs, because now you have another perspective of, well, I believe what I believe because I don't believe that, because I instead believe this other thing. It solidifies what you believe, and it just gives you that additional perspective to see the world through somebody else's eyes. I think that's just general benefits all around. You can interact with other people even better because you recognize like, this new person I'm interacting with, depending on what you do in the day. If you meet somebody new on the street and you say, well, they might have a perspective similar to what I just learned, so I'm going to treat them in this way. I'm going to treat them kindly. I can understand that they are human just like me, have a good reason for believing what they believe. And yeah. All right. Well, those are my thoughts. I hope you guys have a good morning. Be curious, be courageous, be humble, and let's not demonize those who think differently than us. If anything, let's just enter into those conversations with compassion, with curiosity. You know, maybe you'll find out that they are not a bad person after all. Or maybe you find out that they are a bad person for other reasons. Maybe they're just a jerk. Maybe they're kind of rude and whatever. Maybe they're closed-minded. You're willing to ask them, hey, why do you think what you think? I'm curious about that. And maybe they then articulate, yeah, everybody who thinks differently than me is stupid. Maybe they're a little closed-minded. And like, okay, well, all you can do is control yourself. All you can do is look out for yourself and control what you think. Either way, no matter what the outcome is, I think those conversations are beneficial. I think they're beneficial for our personal growth and professional growth, because you get more experience interacting with differing viewpoints, which is helpful when you're in a workplace. It's helpful in most corporate workplaces, a little less applicable when you're like an entrepreneur or self-employed or something like that, working on your own. But I think it's just overall good. Well, I've probably been talking for a long time, so I'm going to wrap it up here, and thanks for listening. Hope you have a good morning, and get some coffee today. So, later.